Hey, welcome to another episode of SteeleWatching. This is episode 6, Steele Belted. I'm Eric.
And I'm Sara.
At the time of recording this, the first episode has released. Woohoo. So by the time you were listening to this, it's actually several weeks, several months past. But we do want to thank everybody who's downloaded the first episode so far. Mm-hmm. The numbers are encouraging. They're not huge, but hey, for a show that's 40 years old at this point, that's not bad. Or 35 years old, that's not bad.
No, it's 40. It's as old as me. 1982.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was counting from the end of the series. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. But does this mean if by the time they hear this, are we in the future?
Yes, we're in the future.
Is this a paradox?
Yes. And you know what a paradox is?
It's quackers.
Yes. Anyway, let's get on with the episode and enough of this silliness. Steele Belted.
Dad jokes. Woo!
Ooh, yes, I'm the king of bad dad jokes.
I bet.
In fact, my dad jokes are so bad that most dads have just written me off. Anyway, Steele Belted first aired on the 12th of November, 1982. It was written by show creator Michael Gleason and directed by co-creator Robert Butler. I actually used the TV guide listing this time, Sara, because it wasn't half bad. I was tempted to combine it with the production synopsis because it had a little bit different take on some of the things, but I thought, let's just keep it nice and simple. Just do one. TV guide listing. The agency... Sorry, rented lips. That's a Robin Williams comment. The agency takes on a client charged with murder who simply can't win. The man's alibi, the crime's only witness, is found murdered in Remington's apartment, and the man's lawyer seems more interested in Laura than the case.
That's good synopsis.
It is, yes.
Thumbs up to that one.
So it starts out with some unidentified man trashing Steele's apartment. And then, of course, he arrives home with an as yet unidentified female guest.
Miss Taplinger. We never actually learned her first name.
No, we don't. We don't.
He never says. I don't know. Does Steele even know it? There's a question.
Well, he doesn't use it, so maybe he's forgotten it. But she does seem intent on using the break-in as an excuse for horizontal relaxation techniques, doesn't she?
She's a treat. I gotta ask, does every person who ransacks a place have to be so loud? Wouldn't his neighbors hear something?
You'd think.
Theoretically.
You'd think.
And he's just throwing things all over the place. I'm like, you're breaking in.
Yes.
Be a little quieter, my dude.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, it's excessive. And then Steele comes back with his date using Fred. Is he allowed to use Fred for his dates?
It's his agency. He can do anything he wants, right?
I guess,
wait,
yeah.
No, it's not. No.
His name isn't Remington Steele.
Oh, he says it is later in the episode. He says, or my name isn't Remington Steele. Well, I guess.
Very confidently, too.
Yes, yeah. I guess he can use Fred. I mean, if Fred's on the clock already, and we talked about him being available 24/7, I mean, I suppose he could.
Poor Fred must have no life.
Probably not.
Sorry, honey, got to go drive Mr. Steele out for his dinner with...
He probably keeps a sleeping bag in the trunk.
Yeah.
And of course, then after Steele and Miss Taplinger show up and the apartment's been trashed and Steele sees the guy out on the corner waving him down, he hands her one of the paintings off of his wall.
And just boots it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least it's not a body, I guess. But he does seem to be developing this habit or this pattern of just handing people things. When things go bad, things go sideways. Oh, here, hold this. Picture, dead body. It's all the same, right?
Yeah. And it's usually, in this case, not, but it's usually a client. So usually the client gets handed the dead body or the case,
It's
whatever.
a civilian.
But this time it's her.
Yeah, it's a civilian of some sort.
It's his date.
Yes.
I noticed something, and this is something I thought of when you pointed this out in an earlier episode, because I had noticed in an earlier episode that his address, I think it was the second one actually, Tempered Steel, was the same as my address, the numbers, 316. But this time it's different. When he comes out, it says 1350. And it doesn't say the Rossmore, it says the Plaza on the front of his building. But the interior is the same.
Built by the same company, managed by the same company. He just relocated temporarily. I don't know.
Yeah, he just went to a different apartment that looks exactly the same. I wonder if this goes with what you were saying and probably what you'll point out later about this episode. Maybe should have been an earlier episode.
Yes, I'm thinking that that's a possibility now that you mention that. Either that or Edward Mulch is at work already. I don't know. Okay, if you haven't seen the series, just stick with us. We'll get to Edward Mulch.
This is definitely not spoiler free.
No. And if you want spoiler free, I'm sorry. You came to the wrong place.
Yep.
Let's see. After that, they're in the office and, Steele comes in and he's a little bit upset. I have some questions. Well, first, and then we'll get to this thing about.
You. I'm assuming they're the same questions, but go on.
We have had that happen, haven't we? That kind of kismet thing.
Yep. Our notes are usually similar.
Well, first of all, he's acting like a 5-year-old. You know how when a 5-year-old comes in and he wants his mother's attention, she's on the phone talking to somebody, work, the bank or whatever.
She's on the
Laura's
phone.
on the phone. And he's sitting there, mommy, mommy, mommy. I mean, he's whistling it, but it's basically the same thing as a 5-year-old. Mommy, mommy, mommy. How old is he?
I actually had petulant cat in my notes, but yes, because it's almost like he's, knocking things off the kitchen counter.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you are a cat person, aren't you?
But yes, my daughter does this when I'm on the phone. Like she'll pick that moment to try to show me a drawing or whatever. And it's like, I'm on you're right. He can see she's busy.
Yeah.
Chill.
I've been available for 3 hours, and the 1 minute I'm on the phone, you've got to talk to me. Why does that sound familiar?
Yep.
And then after he finally gets her attention, he starts telling her about the break-in. And let's go back to a conversation that you have mentioned several times. Where does he get his money from to buy a very fine collection of pre-Columbian art? Not to mention an extensive collection of Impressionist paintings, in addition to, which he never finishes. Where did he get this? Is the agency buying all this?
This was in my notes. And it was also in my notes because he's got... literally, my notes say Steele acts like an impatient 5-year-old. So we've got that in common, like the word for word. And then he launches into a list of things in his apartment worth stealing. And in my question, similarly, for a man who goes from place to place and never settles down, where was he storing this? Did he buy this when he moved in? Because otherwise, where was he storing this collection of pre-Columbian fine art and Impressionist paintings?
You must have read my notes because I wrote, sounds as if these are things he has collected since becoming Remington Steele, not things Laura placed in the apartment prior to his arrival. Because as we know from the premiere episode, she is really bad at dressing a set. You remember all the suits with the tags on them still and the shoes that had nowhere on the soles? Yeah, she's really bad at it. So he had to have done it.
The billion pairs. Yeah. So, I mean, wow, he's really been busy buying all kinds of expensive things because otherwise.
I hope he's been buying them.
So, yes, that was the other thing that I had was that when he storms into the office, there's a ton of clients waiting. So I kind of wrote as a joke. In the previous episode, Thou Shalt Not Steal, Laura had demanded her schedule be wall to wall. Is this Bernice having come through on that promise? Because the whole office is full of people and Laura's in the other room totally ignoring them.
Yeah.
Steele ushers them into his office where he promptly leaves them there. And then, tells Bernice to make up a story about being called by the police commissioner or something. And then they both run off and these are clients. Shouldn't they have appointments or something? Or just, I don't know, shouldn't Bernice be maybe scheduling them appointments so they're not just sitting around?
Well, maybe
this is not maybe a great way to run a business.
Maybe they're appointments in the same way that a doctor sets appointments. Oh, yeah, we know you had an appointment, but, the doctor's busy, so it'll be another hour and a half before you get to see him. and all these other people are sitting here. Yeah, they're in front of you. But this comes into the subject of sequence, which we've already touched on.
Yes.
And you and I had originally talked about how to sequence the episodes for the podcast. And ultimately, we decided that it would be less confusing for everybody if we just stuck to the DVD order, which was also the broadcast order.
Yeah.
But it does highlight the fact that the network, bad boys at the network, showed these out of order. Now, a couple of them we can understand because Tempered Steel was the pilot that they filmed to sell the series, which, according to Michael Gleason, would have been about the 6th episode in. So then they said after they bought it, let's see a origin story episode. Okay, so they wrote another episode called License to Steal. So those two, we understand they're out of sequence. Yeah. But it's up to this point, Steele Belted, that we really have the most discrepancies because according to the production numbers, and there has been some discussion on the Steele Watchers fan group on Facebook. So if you are not a member of Steele Watchers, go check it out on Facebook. But there's been some discussion about the sanctity of the production number sequence. And it was noted that occasionally things got out of sequence, but let's assume that they didn't for this.
Well, some of this can fit character-wise. Some of it makes no sense. Later on, he's looking for pencils. Why doesn't he know where this pen?
And here in this episode, when he's talking about his apartment being ransacked, she says, hey, you don't know anything about what's going on because there's nothing going on. So we're jumping back in time sequentially to him being kept out of the loop, which in the last episode, he was not being totally kept out of the loop. So curiously enough.
Yeah, this part doesn't fit. You're right.
And if we go by production numbers, this would have been the first episode filmed after they did License to Steal, which was the premiere episode, the origin story, so to speak. So this would have fit very well as that first episode after License to Steal, followed by Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, then Steel Waters Run Deep, Hearts of Steel, Thou Shalt Not Steal, and then Tempered Steel. And I put Tempered Steel as the 6th episode of the pre-existing scripts prior to License to Steal, which was an outlier. They created that after the fact.
Yeah.
So my contention to all these problems in this episode, as far as the sequencing, is that I blame the network. So even though we're talking about these in DVD order, which was the airing order, I'm going to go back and change my videos in my Apple iTunes that I also use on my Apple TV, and I'm going to put them in production order because to me, that makes more sense.
To me, it makes sense in some ways and not in others because I was thinking of this as I watched the episode because I remembered you had said this. And so I had this in the back of my head as I watched it, and I was looking for things that did make sense and things that didn't make sense. And some of the things that I thought did make a lot of sense were his jealousy and reaction to Creighton Phillips. I think it makes more sense 6 episodes in than it would have 2 episodes in. I think it would have felt a little bit premature and out of place. So there's parts where it works, but also parts where, like you said, why are they keeping him out of the loop? Why doesn't he know where the pencils are? Bernice corrects him on the Fox Wolf thing, which she hasn't done in a while. So there are parts of it that definitely you can tell sequencing wise it was meant to be earlier, and parts where I think it accidentally fits well for character development.
Yeah, I think it's accidental. Although, again, we're assuming that if this was the first episode after License to Steal, we're assuming a fairly short time frame between those two, and it may be longer than we give it credit for.
True.
Which could explain some of his attitude toward Laura.
Yeah, I think I'll really have to rewatch it too in that order and see if my impressions change because, it's an interesting experiment, I think.
Yes.
For sure.
And it's definitely the source of a lot of debate within the community, that's for sure. At the end of that, you were mentioning about all of the people there in the office.
Just sitting around.
Yes. And I did mention in my notes, he dumps all the clients on Bernice. Mm-hmm. And then he tries to con her about the key to Laura's filing cabinet. Yeah.
She's not having it. I love how she just does not even blink.
Yeah.
None of what he says.
I seem to have misplaced that's because you never had
You
one.
never had a key. Total deadpan. You know?
Yeah. I love Bernice. I love Bernice.
I really wish I get it. I get that they wanted to streamline. I wish they had kept her. I really do.
Yeah. And then that phone call that she gets from Walter Church. This is the one where he in the middle of it asks her on the intercom, do I have any pencils?
Do I have any pencils?
That phone call with Waldo Church, it's like musical chairs.
Yeah.
He's talking about all these different people, and Steele just can't figure out what he's talking about, who he's talking about, what's going on. I have no clue.
She just sort of storms in and slams the pencil down.
Yeah. But, that conversation, it's a little bit like musical chairs or a hallway door chase scene from Scooby-Doo with all these people and names going all these different directions. So you're trying to figure out what's going on. And that's where he's at this.
Yeah.
So
I got a bit of a who's on first vibe, too. Like the Rubio, and he licks the pencil. Ugh.
A lot of people, they don't do people don't use pencils much anymore, but that used to be a thing. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me.
It's lead.
Well, graphite.
It's lead.
But yeah, it's still, it's not like it's a felt pen where you got to moisten it to. Yeah. Some people did that too.
True. The other thing I wanted to point out when he's complaining to Laura about his break-in, she doesn't seem to care at all, first of all. She's completely,
not at all.
She brushes it off. She's very flippant and kind of mean. Maybe it was someone from your sordid past or a jealous lover, perhaps. She's kind of, and this is one of the character pieces that kind of works well on the heels of Thou Shalt Not Steal, because she's just met Felicia. So she could theoretically still be smarting a bit over the whole Felicia incident. So that could potentially explain her somewhat coldness to him. I do love his alliteration, though. Some pervert pranced through my personal possessions. That bit of writing is just because he enunciates and punctuates each P, and it's just really well done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can kind of see that part fitting well with Thou Shalt Not Steal coming before it, even though it's accidental. Again, I think it works.
That's true. Yeah. But I think a lot of this stuff was already in the minds of Michael Gleason. And so it just kind of found its way in.
True.
And of course, you mentioned the pencils, and what's the point in asking for a pencil if you have nothing to write on?
Well, he writes on the desk.
On the desk, yeah.
He must have just memorized it then, because unless he went and got a piece of paper from Bernice and wrote it again, which she probably wouldn't have been too fond of. Do I have any pencil? Do I have any pencils? Do we have paper?
Okay, so after that, we see Laura tracking down Buddy Shapiro.
Yep.
And now we can start putting some faces to some of the names.
I have some thoughts on this. I used to work for a hotel company.
Oh, yeah?
I used to book hotel reservations.
Okay.
I get that Buddy is trying to hide from people, but so I worked for a reservation booking call center.
Okay.
And what most people don't realize when they book a hotel, whether it's through Marriott or whatever chain you're booking with, is that usually when you call, you're not getting anybody actually at the hotel. You're usually getting somebody at a call center. They pretend they're at the hotel. We're supposed to do that. This is the secrets you're learning here.
Yes.
I worked for Starwood. Starwood got bought out by Marriott. So your Sheratons, your Four Points, all of those hotels, the Westons, I used to book those.
Courtyard.
And no, Courtyard was Marriott. So I guess when they amalgamated, but yeah. I left by that point because it was a horrible job. But anyway, so when people would call, we were told to pretend to be at the property. So that created some problems when people would ask to speak with Jim in room 304. Because I don't know Jim, and I don't know 304, and I don't know anything because I'm not there.
Right.
But when we would have to call hotels and things like that for a customer and to try to, we were not in any way told that we couldn't let somebody know what room a person was staying in, or at least provide them a phone number for the guest or the room that they're at. I don't know, maybe the 80s were different, but that was just very strange to me, having booked those rooms, that I couldn't look up a reservation and say, oh yeah, so-and-so staying in room 234 at the Westin.
It wasn't that he was not able to look it up.
He said he wasn't allowed. Like, we're not
Yeah.
allowed to provide the name
Yeah.
of a guest. And I'm like, yeah, you are.
Yeah. Well,
Did it all the time, my dude.
But okay, you're talking maybe corporate policy, and maybe he's talking.
This is what I wondered, if it was just
property.
Buddy saying, like, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, or maybe his manager, or
Yeah.
maybe they've just got a blanket policy at that particular motel
That's true.
because of the type of people who come in
Yeah.
that they don't want
That's
anybody knowing. So we just don't do that. But yeah, Laura proves that she's definitely a capable detective.
Also, awesome fedora. Love it.
Yeah.
Considering we use the fedora as our logo.
Yes, she is a hat rack. That is for sure.
Yep.
Steele at Church's Motel.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get this straight. There are bad guys breaking into your apartment, and some guy calls you and says that some other guy is trying to kill him. So, yeah, sure, walk right into the strange apartment or a strange motel room as if you're out on a casual stroll. Yeah, that makes sense.
Kind of shows a big difference between the hotel that Walter Church is staying at and the hotel that Buddy Shapiro is staying at, because Buddy Shapiro, the concierge, is like, nope, can't give you that info. And Steele just walks right on in, and the concierge didn't even know anyone was staying there. He says no one knew the room was rented.
Yeah. But I'm just fascinated at the logic, sarcasm quotes, of walking in. I mean, it's an unidentified room. It's empty. You're supposed to be meeting a guy there, but it's empty, and all this other stuff has been going on. Don't you think you might want to use a little care and caution going in instead of just walking in bold as day and just getting your head bashed?
I think this goes into the category of, this is definitely meant to be the second episode, because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing and just wanders right on in like a moron, you know? And then he gets hit over the head. I found it very interesting that in the scene where Laura is speaking with Creighton Phillips, or as I like to call him, Chin Dimples, Buddy is in the process of booking a flight to Brazil, and Creighton's just like, well, they're threatening to revoke his parole. What can I do? Like, I get that you're his lawyer, but shouldn't there be something preventing you from just sitting there and watching a accused criminal make a run for it?
I guess as long as he's getting paid, what does he care? And of course, we find out later why, but yeah.
But that should have been Laura's first clue that Creighton maybe wasn't this wonderfully philanthropic, good-hearted guy. Just letting his client make a...
Yeah, I think there's something about ethics for a lawyer.
I would think there would be.
Ethics, a lawyer. Are those...
Maybe
can,
they don't
Can I
go
say
together.
those two words together?
That's a good point. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain obligations that lawyers have to the bar. And I would think that if you know that a felon or an accused felon is thinking of fleeing the country, that would probably be in there somewhere.
I would think so too.
So yeah, you're right. Why wouldn't Laura pick up on that?
It just feels like a very strange thing for a lawyer to just be in the room while he's doing it. You'd think that with your client planning to do something illegal, you would say, okay, you know what? I can't know about this. And you'd leave.
Yes.
And Laura's just standing there watching him do it too. And she's like, okay, I guess the lawyer's cool with it. So am I. You know?
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, that's what a good lawyer, again, maybe sarcasm quotes around that, would do is leave the room. I can't testify to something I don't know about.
Well, because he would be asked about it.
Yeah. It's nonsense. Yes. Back at the office after all this.
Clients are still sitting there. Still people sitting around.
Yeah. And he walks in looking like the victim of an ambush, which, of course, he was, because he's, I don't want to say he's an idiot, but okay, he acted like an idiot.
He was on the wrong side of a lamp. I think that's what he tells Laura.
And then, of course, the game of 20 questions, followed by the movie reference that enlightens everybody about everything. DOA. Edmund O'Brien, Pamela Britton, United Artists, 1949. I know what it means. What does it mean? That's a good line. I like that.
It is a
line.
good line. Yeah, I like that one too. And the fact that she initially, again, assumes jealous husband, right? And then it's not until he says, do I know somebody named such and such, that Laura realizes, oh, crap. he stumbled into what we're working on and she has to let him in on it. And Murphy's still kind of like, no, I don't think we should tell him. She launches in and just explains it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, she insists that he show him to Eagle Rock. And I love his, I thought I never involved myself directly in a case. You're making an exception this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a precursor to some of the other episodes that we've gone through where he is being informed on the cases ahead of time so that he knows what's going on. So he can at least pretend to be involved. Yeah. And
theoretically, he should have been pretending to vet all of the people out in the waiting area with maybe Bernice's supervision, right? They could have at least...
Yeah, they could have at least put on a show.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, she had tried to get him to go with her and talk to Buddy.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I thought I never involved myself directly in a case. And then when she's trying to hurry him up, he throws her words back at her and says, basically says, Remington Steele never shows up wrinkled.
Never shows up wrinkled.
I mean, it's not exactly her words, but he's throwing back the creation at her because that's the character she created.
Yep.
So it's always fun to see him paint her into a corner.
And to then play the part, which he does in the next scene with Buddy, sort of. At first he starts out kind of convincing Buddy to go. It's just, well, not to Rio, to the Bahamas. They speak the Queen's English, tax shelters, etc. Yeah. And Laura's just looking at him like, what is wrong with you?
Obviously, he didn't get the script.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And it's so funny to watch because she's just, and then of course she sort of nudges him and he, of course that's the wrong thing to do. Yeah, definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah. And then Phillips hits on Laura.
Her response.
That exactly hints of Laura's wild past.
Yeah. When I'm in the market for pleasure, Mr. Phillips, I want more than a smidgen.
Yes.
It's a good line.
It is, but it definitely sets up some episodes later.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks down this idea that we've developed of Laura being this straight-laced, no-nonsense, never mix business with pleasure.
Yeah.
Keep it business-like attitude, because obviously that's a cover. That's a shell.
Oh, yeah. I think at least with Creighton Phillips, he's removed enough that that's what makes her accept the offer for dinner. Mm-hmm. Because she's working every single day with Steele. They're in their back pocket almost all the time. Even when they're trying to keep him away from things, he's there.
Right.
So getting involved with him would be pretty much a recipe for disaster. Whereas with Creighton Phillips, technically she's working with, he says, I'm not your client. I'm a client of a client or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But after the case is over, theoretically, they would be free agents. So I think that's why she sees him. And he seems very similar to some of the other men that we see her exhibit an interest in, other than Steele, in again, spoilers, like Tony or William Westfield or, well, I guess not, maybe not Butch Bemis. He's a bit of an outlier. But, he's got, what a name. He's got like that stability and that seeming security to him that would be enticing for her.
Yeah, and maybe in some ways he is the same type of personality that Wilson is or was,
he seems that
we find out about later.
With the exception of the whole murder part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but what's a little murder between friends?
Yeah, exactly. But he seems like he's philanthropic. He's doing all this good work.
Why let a murder get in the way?
Yeah, it's all good except the whole pesky killer part.
Yeah.
Multiple. He's a serial killer. He's killed, 2 people in the episode?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think 2 or more is a serial killer, correct?
I don't know what the technical definition is. Maybe 3. I don't know.
Oh, well, he's one short. Tough luck.
Hey, there's always next time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get some hints, maybe, at Steele's past.
I think this hint is genuine.
Do you?
I do, yeah.
I think tend toward that as well, but given his past, given his character, given his nature, you can't totally dismiss the possibility that it's just another act.
True. I think the reason I tend towards the this is legit part is that he usually doesn't pull out the darker parts of his past willingly in front of Laura in a way. And he usually, when he's using the act, it's usually ridiculous claims like, oh, you know, I used to play polo all the time with Charles, but now he's too busy or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. He's usually using a bit of more of an elaborate exaggeration. It doesn't seem, this isn't a brag. It's not something that I think he would be proud of, that he spent time living on the streets or that he knows the darker parts of London. I don't think he would assume Laura would be impressed with that. So, but he also knows that Laura wants him to get Buddy's to stay, and Buddy makes that comment about him not being street enough, that he looks like the trust fund type, and I think that maybe rankled him a little bit too.
I hear what you're saying, and like I said, I tend to, for the most part, agree with you on that. I do think this is genuine, but I guess I'm a little bit like Laura in that respect of, well, he's really, really good at manipulating people, and maybe it's one of those double negative things where he knows that this is depressing enough, sob story enough that it might draw her in. I don't really believe it, but there's just that little bit of doubt.
I do think that she's right when she says something along the lines of the shortest distance between 2 points for you is an angle. Yeah. So it doesn't, even if it is true, I wouldn't put it past him, as you said, to use it when it's convenient for him, i.e. make her curious, make her want to know more, make her sad for him or happy for him or whatever it is. Yeah. And in this case, it helps convince Buddy, which is what she wants. So it could be a matter of, well, I'll divulge this part of myself that I normally wouldn't because it's going to get what she wants. And then, of course, she'll be happy with me. And she is.
Yes.
When she's talking to Murphy. I mean, he doesn't know it, but when she's at the Hotel Saracen with Murphy, going on about how, oh, you should have seen him, Murphy. He was the quintessential Remington Steele, which, of course, you can almost see the steam coming out of Murphy's ears.
Well, you know, and that was the next thing I was going to come to was that conversation, because you're right. You can see the steam coming out of his ears, metaphorically speaking, but you can hear it in what he says. And he's like, you know, for once, I'd like us to have a conversation where his name didn't come up.
Yeah.
Usually she's the one saying that in the past.
True. Yeah. Because he's the one always bringing him up and complaining about him.
Yes. He's complaining about him. And then Laura says, you know, why do you have to keep bringing him up? But in this case, she's raving about him.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to hear this.
Poor Murphy.
Yeah. You know, and then he comes really, really close.
Oh, the poor man.
To almost saying something about how he feels. I mean, he really does say something about how he feels toward her. But he couches it in this kind of mirror image that he's not what you need. What you need is someone with the same feelings, the same values, somebody you can share things with.
And he also points out the longer she waits, the more she shuts herself off from the people who care about her, which is another direct hint. And again, if we're going with things that accidentally work character-wise, Steele had found out in a previous episode about Wilson, about having the fact that she had lived with someone. We don't know how long it's been since Wilson has left.
Correct.
But theoretically, if it's been a certain amount of time, this could be Murphy saying, okay, you've waited. You've healed, you've whatever, but if you shut yourself off, you're gonna miss things. You're gonna miss opportunities, i.e. me. I'm here. Hi, Laura, I'm here. And she, of course, takes this little pep talk as an opportunity to go and call Creighton.
Yeah, well,
right in front of him.
And he asks her at the very end, he says, I know this bill of sale is important, but have you heard anything I've said to you? And she says, well, yes.
Yeah.
No.
And she kisses him on the lips.
She heard the words. Yeah. She didn't hear the meaning.
Oh, exactly. In my note, I even has this.
You're an English teacher, isn't you?
To read makes our speaking English good. I had, can she really be that dense? She kisses him on the lips and then proceeds to call Creighton right in front of him.
I don't think it's that she's dense. I think it's that she's not paying attention.
Yeah.
Because if she was paying attention, she would get it.
Yeah, maybe.
Because she's not that dense. She's just so preoccupied with other things that it's just not getting through her filter of focus, 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 focus.
Yeah, and I don't think she sees Murphy as... I don't want this to sound... This might sound bad. I don't think she sees him as a man that is a viable potential partner. She sees him as a friend, potentially even as a brother type, but I don't think she's looking at him as, this is somebody I can date.
Yeah, it's the brother feeling, the sibling feeling that is probably the killer there, because, you know, if you're going to date someone, if you're going to have a lifelong relationship with them or a long-term relationship with them, you do at least want to start out being friends. It's got to be about more than just the horizontal relaxation.
Yeah. You also have to have a really tidy apartment.
Yes, because that's a really big turn on too, apparently.
Staplinger. It was so tidy.
But where was I? Oh yeah, the brotherly love, brotherly affection, brotherly attitude.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, is that they, you know, and maybe that's partly Murphy's fault. Maybe that's how he started it, was a brother type relationship. I mean, attitude wise.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. He probably held back enough that she ceased to see him as a potential candidate. Maybe she did at some point, or could have even.
He missed the train. Which
is a shame, because he's not bad looking. Just saying.
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. Yeah.
What about that date?
Chin dimples. What are you doing?
And again, we get precursors. We get hints. We get foreshadowing, because later on we find out that she's a circus freak.
Yep. She enjoys, spoilers,
yes.
Enjoys the circus.
She says, I had visions of a sedate French restaurant, informative stroll through an art gallery, and maybe a Kurosawa retrospective.
In my notes.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Creighton Phillips, he doesn't strike me as a circus type guy, but he also doesn't strike me as a French restaurant, art gallery, art movie type guy either. I think she's describing the sort of date she expected from Remington Steele.
Yeah, and I think as well that Creighton, I'm not sure what type of guy he is, but I don't think that this date was entirely because he was interested in Laura.
Well, obviously not.
I think he partly is, but he's also interested in finding out a little bit about, he's suspicious of Steele and trying to keep her distracted enough not to figure him out.
And keep tabs on what they're doing and finding out. Because remember, they're looking for Church, who's got the sales receipt.
Yep.
And he wants to know if they find him. So it's definitely, I think there's some interest there, but I think it's just as much or more so trying to keep tabs on their progress.
Yeah. And he's, like I said, I think he's suspicious of Steele in some way, shape, or form. He points out the way that she looks at him, hangs on his every word. And of course, Laura's just sort of shocked by this, and then says that Steele looks at her erotically. Just the way he says it, too. And says he doesn't trust Steele. And of course, Laura, her response is, how do you, he's Remington Steele. She has zero, she's so flustered. She's not able to offer up any sort of response to that because, of course,
no poker face.
There isn't one. So she just falls back on the whole, but he's Remington Steele.
Yeah. Well, as if that means something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the fact that Creighton recognizes that Steele isn't everything he's claiming to be is a direct lead into Steele's comment later about it takes one to know one.
This was a good comment because that's early indication that Steele has instincts beyond just being a face, but also that it takes one con artist to spot another con artist. And Creighton susses him out a little bit by questioning Laura. And then, of course, Steele on the other side of it wonders about Creighton as well.
Yeah. And then, of course, before we get to that, comes up a little bit later, at the end of this date that we see, the part that we see, and she's tried to defend him by, choking on her words. Oh, that's ridiculous. He's Remington Steele.
He's Remington Steele.
Comes back to, do we have to talk about him?
Which is what Murphy said. Yeah. And it's funny because that's what Murphy said to her.
And it's like, hello, Laura.
All roads seem to lead back there somehow.
Back into Steele's apartment. You mentioned this earlier about a neat apartment being so stimulating.
You have no idea how neatness stimulates me. It can take all night to calm me down.
According to Krebby at the Steele and Love website, this scene had, she says different music, but I didn't hear any music in this at all. So apparently they edited the music out entirely. And it kind of, it is missing something when you watch the scene. It should have some music.
Yes.
And it looks like at one point he reaches down and flips on the stereo just before he lights the fire. So
this is one of those things where it's not as big a deal now when DVD box sets are released, because even now DVD box sets are sort of going out of fashion. They're not really, you can usually get stuff on streaming, and if you lose a show, it pops up on another streaming website, or you can buy it digitally. But when this DVD box set first came out, the things like licensing rights to music, of course, were more expensive. So this was part of the thing that this happened as well with, I think, there was another show where it happened as well, where you see episodes and you're like, that's not the right song. There should be something else in there. And it just kind of ended up being an unfortunate downside to early DVD box set releases.
Well, it killed the DVD release of WKRP.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. I read that. Yeah. Because they couldn't get the music, and that show is all built on music. So
they released the first season, and they replaced all the popular music that had appeared in the episode. And worse, or crazier, more crazy, they even replaced some of the stock music, some of the incidental music that was stock from their own libraries, because they couldn't apparently find whatever paperwork they needed. And part of that situation was because when WKRP was originally shot, the licensing was going to be horrendous for the show in the first run. And so they found a catch.
Makes sense.
That if they shot it on videotape, the licensing was totally different and made the show financially affordable. But yeah, that's happened to a lot of shows. Unfortunately, it seems to have happened to a lot of MTM properties. I don't know why, but yes, it's unfortunate. But maybe someday somebody will do a restoration of this and we'll get the music back.
Fingers crossed.
But I like her comment after Steele sends her into the room and he's lighting the fireplace and turning on the music. That isn't there. Yeah. She comes out and says, a little crowded in there. And then, of course, first the apartment, now this. I never dreamed there were so many unique ways to end an evening. And she delivers that. She delivers that so well. And just so.
She is, that actress is perfect. She's just so, and even in the later scene where he's handing her the drink and she's drinking it and just like, she grabs it again. And I have a question though. How did Creighton get into Steele's apartment? Because theoretically it's Creighton that left the body there. He's on a date with Laura. When did he have time to kill this person and put him in Steele's bedroom? Because when Laura shows up, she's with Creighton, which the only way, and Steele mentions after Creighton leaves that he tried calling the office and she wasn't there, and he's got Fred theoretically. So did Creighton go home with Laura, and is that how he reached her? And if so, when did he have a chance to put the body in Steele's bedroom?
Icebox question. You know what that is, right? Okay. Should I explain it for anybody who doesn't know?
Maybe the listeners don't. Yeah. Maybe explain it for
Alfred Hitchcock, master of suspense, was once quoted about some of the inconsistencies and some of the nonsensical things that appeared in his movies. And his response was essentially, it doesn't matter as long as while you're in the theater, you believe it and buy it. Now, if later on in the middle of the night, you get up to get yourself a piece of chicken out of the icebox and it suddenly hits you and you say, wait a minute, it's too late. You bought it already.
Yep.
That's got to be what this is an icebox question.
And you know what it is? Because until we sat down to do this podcast, I was not thinking about these little logistics. It's not until I'm watching it and making notes that I'm going, wait a minute. He couldn't find her, so Creighton must have gone home with her. But then how did the body get in the... Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. Icebox question.
Yeah, podcasts are terrible for this sort of thing.
It's going to ruin it, everybody. Sorry. This is like being a history student, because I have a history degree. So anytime I would take a history course on something that I was really into, the first thing the professors would say is, we're going to ruin everything that you thought about this thing from the movies. So I took a class on like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce. First thing my professor said, everything you learned about Braveheart is wrong. And if you really love that movie, you're going to leave this class right now and not come back. Well, I was like, all right, fine. Destroy it for me. Go for it.
All these movies based on a true story. There was a guy named Bob.
Yeah.
And he lived.
Yeah. Loosely.
Okay. There's the part that's true. The rest of it, we just made it up.
We just made it up. So
back at the office, Laura almost reveals that she's waiting for Steele to make the first move.
This is where, again, I feel like this fits really well character-wise. Because his jealousy is interesting. I don't think it's an emotion he's used to, and he's not sure how to handle it. And making it worse is the fact that she's free to date whoever she pleases, and he feels really helpless watching her do it.
And I think also, it's not just that he's helpless to stop her from dating whoever she wants to, and that in itself is rubbing him the wrong way, but he's already starting to get hints that something's not right with Creighton Phillips.
Yeah.
And so there's that too. And it's like, okay, I'm jealous that you're going out with these other guys and you have this sudden lust for cotton candy, but it's not just that you're going out with other, it's him in particular.
Yes. And he's also dating someone. Laura doesn't seem terribly bothered by it. She's not as jealous, I think, because she knows that his dates are somewhat empty, right? They come and go. Gail had the croup a few episodes back. Now Miss Taplinger's on scene. Nadine was around. Like, there's 3 women, and she's met Felicia, so 4. So she's kind of already pegged him as a guy who doesn't want a serious relationship, and she assumes that his date is one of many that won't last. Whereas Steele knows that she's looking for something serious. She's told him as much when they had their in too deep conversation, which is why this episode sort of, again, accidentally fits. And then added to that is her past relationship that Steele knows about with the man that she lived with. He's afraid Creighton could stick around. And I think that that's part of what prompts him to reach out to Murphy. He's suspicious. There's that little niggle of something's not right here. There's something about this guy that's just not fitting. But also, she could actually like this person. So I want to make sure that he's not a criminal, and or if he is, I want to get rid of him. Or use this as an excuse. He's kind of lucky in the sense that Creighton turned out to be the murderer.
Yeah, probably. Well, and of course, he kind of arranged part of that too. So, but it's in this conversation though. You referenced the line where he says he has no claim on her personal life.
Yes.
And she says, "Well, I didn't think you were interested in one," and he kind of tries to paint her in a corner by once again, bringing up her own rules and saying, "You set the rules." Now you're saying you don't like him because he says, well, it's your rule. Never mix business with pleasure. And she equivocates. She says, well, it's not a hard and fast rule.
It's not a hard and fast.
So he's trying to confront her with all of this stuff, her own inconsistencies, and kind of saying, don't go after Creighton Phillips just because you're afraid to come after me or you're afraid of a relationship with me.
Yeah.
And because you've come up with some silly rule that you expect me to try and violate, even though you're trying to convince yourself.
Oh, for sure. And that's why, again, I think character-wise, this is a good accidental placing for this episode because it's sort of a classic example of how they dance around each other and have difficulty communicating, because when he initially propositioned her, she refused. It was a crude and clumsy attempt to get her into bed. And when it looked as if he were asking her out on a date in Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, initially her entire demeanor changed.
Oh, yes.
She was much more receptive until, of course, she realized he was only asking her as a backup. And she clearly would have said yes to a traditional approach and an evening out, but Steele doesn't know how to do that. So when Laura shoots him down after discovering that he was, she was the second choice, it
I
sets
think
him
she was
back.
like the
And then when
fifth or sixth. I mean, we saw him
third,
making
fourth,
several
fifth,
phone calls.
Yeah, he was going through that black book. But you're right. He throws the rule back at her because she says, "I didn't think you wanted one." It tells him that she's interested in something more permanent, less transient. And by throwing her rule back at her, he puts the onus on her.
Make up your mind which side of the fence you want to be on. Yeah. You want to jump past the police station and go into the clothing store?
Well, there's only one comment that I thought was kind of funny with this. The name Remington Steele carries a certain weight in law enforcement.
Well, and that would all be because of Laura, not because of him.
Yes. No. But I kind of thought that, he says this, and I mean, that's not his real name, but other names that he's used also carry a certain weight in law enforcement, maybe on the other side of things. So it's just kind of a funny little, him. How did you get him out? Well, the name Remington Steele carries a certain weight.
Yeah. And then, of course, we see the conflict between him and Crichton when he asks what Phillips's intentions are toward Laura. And he says, speaking as her boss, I wouldn't want to see her hurt. Unhappiness tends to reduce efficiency, but...
Efficiency. Capitalism, yay!
But speaking as her friend, I'd take serious exception to anyone who brought her pain. So, yeah, it's kind of a mixed message there.
I think he's being genuine there.
Yes, but it's kind of a mixed message to the extent that he's trying to use his official position as her boss to mask his personal interest.
Yes. Yeah, and his insecurity.
At the clothing store, is that woman a nutcase or what?
Oh my God, she's insane. She is nuts.
and after everything that happens and all of her hysterics and histrionics and the almost fighting and such.
I was going to wear taffeta.
Which one do you like better? The pink or the red?
The pink or the red. So my favorite part of this is that she throws her purse at them or whatever it is, and Laura's talking to, and you look over and all the women are tending to Steele's supposed injury from the purse attack. Like they're just clustered around him, dabbing his face delicately with a Q-tip or whatever. He's standing there just sort of soaking in the attention. You can see Laura, wheels are turning. She's kind of irritated. It was kind of a cute little moment.
Yes.
Another icebox question. How did Crichton get the corpse into the car? Was it already there? It was Rodeo Drive, so wouldn't somebody have seen him lugging a corpse
and
into
if
a
he
trunk?
had placed it into the trunk at any time before that, it would have had to have been far enough in advance that there would probably be a little bit of a odor kind of developing.
Yeah, it would start to smell.
What's that smell?
Yep. So I think the main question of this episode is how Crichton Phillips's ninja body moving skills were accomplished. He's very good at that.
Yes. For such a big guy, he certainly does have nimble
Chin dimples.
Back at the office, Murphy and Steele.
I love this scene. It's probably one of my favorite scenes.
Is that a fair recital of my deficiencies?
I love it. He outlines all the reasons Murphy has not to like or trust him. And yeah, is that a fair recital?
Anyone
Yeah.
for a bit of understatement?
I mean, he really does list all the things that would make Murphy suspicious, which means that he's aware of the things that Laura fears about him, but he's also unsure of how to go about fixing them. And he knows how Murphy feels about him too.
And he also has at least some inkling of how much he's been spending. Although I don't think he has a full comprehension of it, because he does say overspent some of the agency's funds on occasion.
Some of the agencies.
on occasion? Like, how about every time you walk outside?
20,000. Was it 20,000 that he spent with Nadine? Yeah.
And then all the stuff.
The polo match.
Well, that wasn't money that he spent. That was money he risked.
He never actually spent it, but
all the stuff in the apartment. Come on, it's his stuff. He says it's his stuff. That means he went out and bought it, presumably had to have been agency funds, because he's not drawing a salary.
Which also kind of suggests that if he is planning on sticking around, it suggests he is planning on staying in the role for an undetermined period of time, because if you're planning to move on from a situation, if you're a con artist who doesn't stay in place very long, you're not going to go out and buy fine art, Colombian art, or impressionist paintings, or things that would make a place a home. You're not going to bother to do that, I don't think.
Unless you were in for a longer con, or you were just trying to set a really good scene, and then you had plans to abscond with it and hide it in some secure location at some point later in the future. I don't know. But no, you're right. I mean, that's not what you would typically expect.
No. I think he's also aware that Murphy is interested in Laura, because I don't think he would have sought Murphy out to help him otherwise. He didn't ask for Bernice's help.
He does kind of allude to that. Maybe not to the level that he's totally aware that Murphy has these feelings toward Laura, but at least to the point that he knows that Murphy cares about Laura as a friend, because he does say, we both care about it. We have this one thing in common. We both care about Laura.
He says very deeply, which is interesting.
Yes, but I think there's two different kinds of caring possible there, and I think Steele sees one in himself and a different one in Murphy.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I don't think at this point Steele has seen anything or heard anything that suggests that Murphy's attitude toward him is anything but professional. And I think underlying...
True, but I think he's also aware that Murphy being that mistrustful is maybe a bit over the top unless there's something else underneath.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of Murphy's distrust, his so-called professional distrust, is a cover for his feelings. But I'm not sure that Steele recognizes that yet. Maybe subconsciously he recognizes it, but I don't think he's thought it through yet at this point.
I don't think Murphy would have welcomed him with open arms, even if he wasn't interested in Laura. But
no, definitely not.
His interest in Laura obviously gives him that extra push to be more suspicious. And in this case, Steele uses that with kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of thing, where he points out all the research he's done on Creighton and mentions that Creighton is untrustworthy, and at least gets Murphy's attention enough to get him to agree to look into it. It's some solid detective work, though. Yeah,
it is. But then he kind of spoils it by, when they break in, he's going to steal some of Creighton Phillips's hair to frame him. Did Murphy really know that was the plan? Or did Steele leave that part out or tell him some other plan?
I don't even know if Steele had necessarily I don't know if the hair was necessarily the plan from the jump, or if he just kind of was trying to find anything he possibly could, saw the hairbrush, thought he could use it, got out because they almost caught him. I don't know. I do love the do sound the horn if someone comes by. Oh, sure. It'd be a real shame if you had to spend the night in jail. That bit is really well done between both of them. James Reed delivers that line so perfectly. You're not really sure if he would let him spend the night in jail, and you kind of think maybe, just maybe, he'd let him twist.
Yeah, it would be a real shame.
It's good.
Yeah. But as far as the hair goes, I understand what you're saying, and I don't necessarily totally disagree with it, but I think there is a hint that we got earlier that this was planned, because back at the clothing store, after they found the body in the trunk, he reaches in, tries to pull the man's hand open. There's supposed to be some evidence there that's going to reveal the killer. Now, what kind of clue? Yeah, what kind of clue? What kind of evidence would it be? It would be a button off of a jacket or a shirt. It would be a piece of hair, and so it may not have been specifically a hair.
So he could have just been looking for physical
something that he could use to plant or use to bluff Creighton.
How about the visual gag with the bed?
And the cat. Yeah.
This is another one of those. It's kind of risque. You sort of wonder how it got what is that? He poking it back up, and every time he lands back on the bed. And I never really noticed it before. I mean, I noticed it, but I wasn't thinking about what it was theoretically supposed to be. And then watching it this time, oh God. He's just poking it back up there. And the cat hissing and Creighton becoming extremely
not taking no
pushy
for an answer.
and really creepy. Laura rightfully hits him, and then they go downstairs. And you think to yourself, okay, she's figured out at least that he's not the good guy she thought he was, because he got really handsy and really creepy.
Or at least there's another side to him.
Yeah.
Maybe he's still, for the most part, a good guy, but there's this other side that he lets out every once in a while. But yeah, you're right. It should be a clue.
Yeah.
Back at the office. Testy, Mr. Steele. Jot.
Yeah. And she's just sitting there like shooting daggers.
Doing a slow burn. Just, oh.
And she can't do anything. She can't, dress him down. She can't yell at him. She has to listen to him because, again, he's the boss. So
yeah, she created this stage play, and now she's got to act the part, and she is just beside herself, but she can't do anything about it.
She's not happy. She is not happy. But in this case, he knows what he's doing.
Yes,
for once.
For once, yes. Which, again, as you say, makes it kind of accidentally fit into the position that it is.
Because
he
has been improving over the past few episodes, and he's seen how she works and the way that she uses deception to sort of trap people. So in that instance, again, it kind of fits.
Yeah.
Accidentally.
Accidentally, yeah. And then he starts going into his recitation, and money's usually at the bottom of these things, unless it's a crime of passion, in which, in the case of extreme, unendurable jealousy brought on by an unfaithful partner. Is Laura getting any of this?
Really laying it on thick.
Oh, well, yes, very thick. But I don't get the hint that Laura's really catching what he's talking about.
She's totally clueless. And this is one of those things where you sort of think, I guess maybe if she wasn't blinded by the fact that Creighton seemed like a nice guy, she would have picked up on this too, especially the connection between Rubio and Creighton. You would think that would have been something that she would have latched onto and really investigated.
Yeah. But, he did what Steele did. He conned her. I mean, he's in his own way, he's a con man, because he was presenting himself as this altruistic, look, I'm giving up this high paid position, a partnership in this law firm to help the poor and downtrodden. Pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
And while I'm doing that, would you please pat me on the back as well? Because I really deserve this.
Yeah, well, he was being everything that Remington Steele is kind of supposed to be.
Yes.
He was playing the part better, in a way. But both were fake.
He was appealing to her desires better.
Yes, for sure.
Steele has this little bit to him that is like, okay, yeah, I want to play this part, but I can't resist. I got to pick at this. I just got to pick at this.
I think part of it is a desire to kind of needle her at times, but also part of it is the fact that he doesn't want to lie to her. To make a comparison to Lucifer, the show, I think that he's very much the type of person who, because again, this fits in with an accidental bit from Signed, Sealed, and Delivered when they're in the car, and she outlines all the reasons why she's nervous about getting into a relationship with him. He doesn't say, don't worry, I'll never walk away, or I won't leave you, or, any of that stuff that she wants to hear. He can't say because, of course, they're not even in a relationship. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't want to make her any promises that he knows he can't keep. But he also is trying to, he's trying to get into bed with her. He's trying to get into some relationship of some kind. But I don't think he wants to. It's funny. He's okay with lying in pretty much any other context. but I don't think he's comfortable. It's kind of like how he wasn't comfortable with Sheldon adoring him when it wasn't earned. And I don't think he's capable of lying to her and making a promise where it's not earned. So Creighton had no issues doing that because Creighton is a murderer and he probably is a sociopath from what we've seen of this episode. But Steele at least has some sort of a conscience. So yeah, he teases her, he needles her, he drives her crazy, and he finds it funny, which is immature and silly. But he also doesn't want to, I think, make any promises he can't keep, at least not any big ones.
Yeah. And then, of course, he concludes it by saying the victim will often clutch a piece of evidence that ultimately traps the murderer.
He's got
he changed it. He almost quoted himself exactly from earlier at the clothing store, but earlier it was always. Here it's often. Yeah, got to give himself an out. And and of course, he's not saying he's doing one of these things where I'm telling you something that is a literal truth.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean what you think it means, and I know what you're going to think it means, and I'm saying it this way intentionally so that you'll think it means what you think it means.
Exactly.
Because he never said that he took that out of Rubio's hand. He just says,
"Nope.
Oh, look at this, some hair. You think this will match?" Well, yeah, it will because you took it out of his hairbrush. And you know what? The victim will often clutch a piece of evidence. Well, yeah, that's probably true, but was he clutching something? Well, no, I didn't say that.
It's lawyer speak. He's using lawyer speak because he's making two separate statements that technically don't correlate, but could. So there you go. And of course, Creighton fills in the blanks because he's guilty as hell. So which is very funny.
Yeah, but it's telling a lie with the truth.
I love that he punches him and then promptly breaks his hand.
Yes,
he just looks
not very
so proud.
Bond-like.
No, he just looks so proud that he got to punch him, and he's so happy.
Yes.
And then he's like, "Except I think I broke my hand." And then James Rubio wasn't clutching anything in his hand. Well, he should have been.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and then the very end, he buys Ivy's Rolls Royce,
which of course we never see again,
with the agency's money.
Yep.
And yeah, the reason we don't see it again is because it's even less inconspicuous than a limo.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we can necessarily say that that's the only reason because, of course, the Auburn later on.
Yes, that's true. Although I would say that that's probably less inconspicuous and less ostentatious than the Rolls. But no, your point is taken. Yeah.
But I think it's more that he turns to her and says she's expecting a check as soon as possible or whatever it was. And of course, Laura probably went, "I'm not paying for this car. What are you crazy?" Like, no. Or turned around and sold it and made a profit for the agency.
Yeah.
Could have been also
there you go. Yeah, because he did get a good deal on it. And if the next person doesn't know that there was a dead body found in the trunk, it's not a big deal.
I wonder if there's a law that you have to, because I know that there's a law here, or at least I've read it. I could be wrong, but I thought I read something somewhere that said if you're selling a house in Ontario, you have to disclose whether or not somebody has died in it.
But this isn't a house. This is a car.
No, so I guess that wouldn't apply.
Yeah.
Nobody has died in this car. It is definitely not haunted.
Yeah. No. And I mean, people die in houses. That's to be expected. But in cars, yeah, usually if they die in a car, the car is not sellable anyway. So.
Yeah. This is true.
Anything you want to cover that we didn't hit?
So the only other thing that I had was that Laura at the end asks him if he would have suspected Creighton even if she wasn't involved with him. And Steele evades the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, I go back and forth on this. Part of me thinks that there was enough there in Steele's mind as a con man from his own profession that he saw some of the similarities in Creighton and might have suspected him. But there's another part of me that says, well, he was also jealous, so that might have prompted him to look further into it where he might not have done so otherwise. If there wasn't anything threatening his relationship with Laura, would he have taken that extra step? I don't know.
I'm going to say probably not, because even if we take it in the order that the episodes have been presented, and that this is the 6th episode, he is still really not... He's still not to the point where he's really fully invested in becoming a detective. He's
True.
still not at the point where they've fully invested in keeping him involved in cases. He's still kind of just a pretty face who fits the suit. So I would have to think no.
Suit.
Yes. I'd have to say no, he wouldn't have, or maybe not as quickly and as thoroughly. But yeah, I don't know. I could go either way on it.
That's where I was too. I went back and forth. I lean more towards your answer of probably not, but it's not something that we will ever know.
No, we won't.
So,
well, I guess that's it.
yep.
So let's tell everybody about the website, www.SteeleWatching.com. There you will find show notes and links to, we didn't even mention this, DOA.
That was the
movie reference, because that plot to that movie was somebody trying to find a sales receipt.
Yep.
Before somebody dies. So yeah, we'll have links to Amazon Canada, Amazon US, so that you can buy that movie. It won't cost you any more, but if you use the links that we provide, you will help us with a small mind blank brain fart. Commission. Thank you. That's the word. Yes. I'm not old. I'm old.
I like to say I'm 20 with 20 years experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I was young. Anyway, you want to talk about the other places that we are?
So we have the Facebook page, SteeleWatching. We have the Instagram, and we have Twitter. So all of those places, which you can find links to on the SteeleWatching website, have information, sound bites, upcoming news, things like that. There's also the Steele Watchers Facebook group, which is where all of us kind of gather, talk about the show, post links, pictures, fan fiction, all sorts of weird, wacky stuff. Lots of fun, lots of discussion. So join us.
And if you're a new Steele fan, that Facebook group, Steele Watchers Facebook group, has some very, very long-time fans who are great resources for information. So if you've ever had a question about Remington Steele, that's the place to ask it.
Somebody will know the answer.
Absolutely.
Somebody literally wrote the book.
Literally, yes. Yes.
So.
Okay, next episode, Etched in Danielle Steele.
That was my joke. You stole it.
Etched in steel, but it does very much bear a strong resemblance to a Danielle Steele novel. Yeah, not that I've read any of her books, but nobody ever admits to reading them.
That's the thing. It's like Nickelback. They sell millions of albums, and yet no one will admit to listening to them.
But of course, you did catch the fact that I stole a line from the episode, right?
I did.
Or basically, yes.
Yes.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
This is definitely not spoiler free.
No. Hey, thank you everybody for joining us, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I know I sure did. I had a lot of fun. So we'll see you next time. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.